The forest held its breath as the sun began its descent beyond the western ridge. Arin stood at the edge of the gathering circle, her fingers twisted together in a nervous habit she'd never quite managed to break. Around her, the young wolves of the Silver Moon pack shifted restlessly, their excitement palpable in the cooling air. Tonight was the night they'd all been waiting for, the critical test. She could feel their energy, wild and untamed, so different from the quiet anxiety that coiled in her chest like a sleeping serpent. To her left, Marcus stretched his arms above his head, his confidence radiating outward in waves that made Arin want to shrink further into herself. To her right, Lysa bounced on the balls of her feet, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Can you believe it's finally here?" Lysa whispered, though her whisper carried across the circle like a shout. "After all these years of training, we finally get to prove ourselves." Arin managed a small smile, hoping it didn't look as forced as it felt. Yeah, finally. But the word tasted like ash in her mouth. While the others saw opportunity, Arin saw only the chance to fail spectacularly in front of the entire pack. She'd always been the quiet one, the wolf who preferred the shadows to the spotlight, who would rather tend the herb gardens than run with the hunting parties. Her parents had assured her that every wolf had their place, that strength came in many forms, but the pack didn't always see it that way. The sound of a horn cut through the evening air, deep and resonant. Conversation died instantly as every head turned toward the raised platform where the pack's leadership stood. Arin's breath caught in her throat. Alpha Kale stood at the center, his presence commanding even in stillness. At 28, he was young for an alpha, but no one who looked at him would doubt his right to lead. His dark hair caught the last rays of sunlight, and his gray eyes that seemed to see everything, swept across the assembled wolves with an intensity that made Arin's heart skip. She quickly looked away, focusing instead on the worn leather of her boots. It was safer that way. Kyle had always been kind to her, in the distant way that alphas were kind to all their pack members. But sometimes, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, and those moments made her feel exposed in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Young wolves of Silvermoon," Kale's voice rang out, strong and clear. "Tonight, you stand at the threshold between youth and adulthood. The critical test has been part of our pack's tradition for centuries. A way to measure not just your strength, but your cunning, your courage, and your commitment to the pack." Elder Mordecai stepped forward, his grizzled face stern as always. "The rules are simple," he announced, his gravelly voice carrying across the circle. "You will hunt. Working alone or in pairs, you must track, pursue, and bring down prey worthy of a Silver Moon wolf. You have until the moon reaches its zenith. Those who return empty-handed will be given another chance next season, but your ranking within your generation will reflect this failure." Arin felt her stomach drop. Another season. Another 6 months of being seen as the pack's weakest link, the beta who couldn't quite measure up. However, Elder Mordecai continued, and something in his tone made Arin look up despite herself. "Those who succeed will be granted their adult rank within the pack. Hunters, scouts, healers, guardians. Your performance tonight will help determine where you can best serve Silvermoon." Beside Kale, Beta Commander Sienna added, "You'll be assessed on your choice of prey, your strategy, your execution, and your return. Choose wisely. This test measures judgment as much as skill." Kale's eyes swept across the young wolves once more, and for just a moment, so brief Arin thought she might have imagined it, his gaze lingered on her. "Remember," he said, his voice softer now but no less powerful, "a wolf who forgets the pack in pursuit of glory is no wolf at all. But a wolf who serves the pack with courage and honor will always have a place among us." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they only amplified the pressure building in Arin's chest. She knew what would happen tonight. While Marcus would bring down an elk and Lysa would probably team up with others to corner something impressive, Arin would be lucky to track a rabbit, and everyone would see once again that she didn't quite belong. "You have until the horn sounds at midnight," Elder Mordecai declared. "May the moon light your path." The young wolves exploded into motion. Some immediately shifted into their wolf forms, eager to get started. Others huddled in quick discussions, forming temporary alliances. Arin stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the chaos of bodies and voices around her. "Aaron!" Marcus's voice made her jump. He stood with two other wolves, already partially shifted, their eyes gleaming in the twilight. "You coming with us? We're going after the deer herd near the eastern stream." It was more invitation than she'd expected. Marcus might be arrogant, but he wasn't cruel. Still, Erin knew what would happen if she joined them. She'd slow them down, make too much noise, probably alert the prey before they were in position. And when they succeeded despite her, it would only highlight her inadequacy. I think I'll try on my own," she said, forcing the words out. "But, thank you." Marcus shrugged, unbothered. "Your choice. Good luck." Then he was gone, loping into the forest with his companions, their forms blurring and shifting as they ran. Aaron watched them go, then looked around. The gathering circle was nearly empty now, just a few stragglers and the pack leadership watching from the platform. She felt Kale's eyes on her again and quickly turned away, heading toward the forest's edge before he could see the doubt written all over her face. The moment she passed beneath the canopy of trees, something in Aaron's chest loosened slightly. The forest had always felt like home in a way the pack grounds never quite did. Here, among the ancient oaks and whisper-soft moss, she could breathe. Here, she didn't feel quite so inadequate. She shifted as she walked, letting the transformation wash over her. It was one thing she'd always been good at. The shift came easily to her, smooth and painless where others struggled in their early years. Her wolf form was smaller than most, her coat a soft silver gray that helped her blend into shadows. Not impressive, perhaps, but practical. Aaron padded deeper into the forest, her senses expanding. The world came alive in ways humans could never fully appreciate. Every scent told a story, every sound painted a picture. She could smell where a fox had passed earlier in the day, could hear the rustle of a mouse in the underbrush 50 feet away, could taste the approaching night on the wind. For a while, she simply walked, trying to settle her nerves and decide on a strategy. The eastern stream where Marcus's group had gone would be crowded with hunters now. The northern ridge was rocky and dangerous, especially in fading light. Perhaps the western woods, where the terrain was more forgiving. A rabbit darted across her path, and Aaron's instincts kicked in. She gave chase almost without thinking, her body falling into the familiar rhythm of pursuit. The rabbit was fast, but she was faster, her smaller size letting her navigate the underbrush with ease. For a few precious moments, there was no test, no judgment, no expectations, just the pure simplicity of the hunt. But when she finally cornered the rabbit against a fallen log, Erin hesitated. It trembled there, eyes wide with fear, and she found herself unable to make the final strike. A rabbit. She'd be bringing back a rabbit when others brought deer and boar and who knew what else. The rabbit sensed her hesitation and bolted, disappearing into a burrow before Aaron could react. She sat back on her haunches, frustrated with herself. Even this, the most basic task, she couldn't complete properly. A sound drifted through the trees, distant but distinct. Laughter and excited howls. Other young wolves, already successful in their hunts. The moon was climbing higher. Time was slipping away. Aaron pushed herself forward, moving with more purpose now. She couldn't return empty-handed. She wouldn't. Even if it meant bringing back something small, something that would mark her as weak, it would be better than nothing. Maybe. She was so focused on her own thoughts, on the growing desperation in her chest, that she almost missed it. The scent hit her first, foreign and familiar all at once. Wolf, but not quite. Something else mixed in. Something that made her hackles rise. And beneath it all, the copper tang of blood. Aaron froze, every sense suddenly alert. The smell was coming from somewhere to her south, off the usual hunting paths. Her first instinct was to turn away, to focus on her own test. But something about the scent nagged at her, pulled at her in a way she couldn't explain. She should ignore it, should focus on her hunt, on securing her future in the pack. But the blood scent was strong. Whatever was out there was badly hurt. Aaron's paws moved before she'd fully made the decision, carrying her toward the source of the smell. She told herself she'd just take a quick look, make sure it wasn't one of the pack, then return to her hunt. There was still time, plenty of time. The deeper she went, the stronger the scent became. and the more certain she was that something was very wrong. This part of the forest felt different, the air heavier, charged with something she couldn't name. The usual night sounds had faded, as if every creature was holding its breath. Aaron emerged into a small clearing and stopped dead. A man lay crumpled against the base of an ancient oak, his body twisted at an angle that made her wince. At first glance, he appeared human, dark hair, pale skin, ordinary clothes torn and stained. But when she crept closer, she could see the telltale signs that marked him as other. His fingernails were too long, too sharp. His ears came to subtle points. And when she got close enough to see his face, his eyes, though closed, had the kind of bone structure that no full human possessed. Hybrid. Half wolf, half something else. Fae, maybe, or witchblood. The kind of creature the pack had uneasy treaties with, complicated relationships that stretched back generations. He was bleeding from a wound in his side, the blood dark and wrong-smelling, poisoned, maybe, or cursed. His breathing was shallow, labored. Without help, he'd be dead before midnight. Aaron shifted back to her human form, kneeling beside him. Her hands hovered over the wound, uncertain. She had some healing knowledge. She'd spent enough time with the pack's healers, but this was beyond her skill. He needed proper care, needed to be brought back to pack grounds. But bringing him back meant abandoning the test, meant failing in front of everyone. The stranger's eyes flickered open, and Aaron gasped. They were golden, pure, bright gold, and even clouded with pain, they held an intensity that pinned her in place. "Please," he whispered, his voice rough. "Don't. Go. They're coming back." "Who?" Aaron leaned closer. "Who did this to you?" His hand shot out, surprisingly strong, and gripped her wrist. "The pact," he managed. "Breaking. They want it to fail. Tonight. The test." His eyes bored into hers. "Trap. It's a trap." Aaron's blood ran cold. "What do you mean? The critical test?" But the stranger's eyes had closed again, his grip on her wrist loosening. His breathing grew more shallow. Aaron's mind raced. A trap. He'd said the test was a trap. But that was impossible. The critical test had been performed for generations. It was sacred tradition. And yet, she thought of Elder Mordecai's stern face, of the way Beta Commander Sienna had emphasized judgment. She thought of Kale's words about wolves who forgot the pack, and suddenly they seemed less like general wisdom and more like a specific warning. But if she ran back now to warn everyone, she'd have no proof. Just the word of a dying stranger and her own reputation as the pack's shy, uncertain beta. They'd think she was making excuses for failing the test. And if she was wrong, if this was some kind of trick, the stranger groaned, his body convulsing. The wound in his side was getting worse, spreading in a way that natural injuries didn't. Definitely cursed then. He'd be dead within the hour without help. Aaron looked toward the direction she'd come from, where the rest of the young wolves were hunting, where her future waited to be determined. Then she looked back at the dying stranger with his golden eyes and his cryptic warning. It wasn't really a choice at all. She shifted back into her wolf form and moved closer to the stranger, using her body heat to keep him warm. Then she tilted her head back and howled, not the hunting call she should have been making, but the healer's signal, the one that meant emergency, help needed, come quick. The howl echoed through the forest, and Aaron knew that everyone, the other young wolves, the pack leadership, all of them, would hear it, would know that she'd abandoned the hunt for something else, would judge her for it. She howled again, then settled beside the stranger to wait. His breathing was so faint now that she had to press close to feel it. She didn't know if help would come in time, didn't know if he'd been telling the truth about the trap, or if her decision to stay with him would cost more than just her ranking in the pack. But as she lay there in the gathering darkness, keeping vigil over a stranger who might be her pack's doom or salvation, Aaron felt a strange certainty settle over her. This was right. Whatever came next, this choice, to help someone who needed it, consequences be damned, was right. The moon climbed higher, time slipped away, and Aaron waited. It was Elder Thorn who arrived first, the pack's head healer moving with surprising speed for his advanced years. He took one look at the stranger and let out a low whistle. "Fey wolf," he muttered, already pulling supplies from the bag he'd brought. Haven't seen one of these in decades. What happened? I don't know, Aaron said, staying in human form now to help. I found him like this. The wound. Cursed blade, Thorn confirmed, his expression grim. Nasty business. Someone wanted him dead badly. He glanced at Aaron. You howled instead of hunting. It wasn't a question, but Aaron nodded anyway. I couldn't leave him. Thorn was quiet for a moment, his weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency as he worked to stabilize the stranger. Finally, he said, That was either very foolish or very brave, young one. Perhaps both. Before Aaron could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both look up. Beta Commander Sienna emerged from the trees, her expression unreadable. Behind her came 3 of the pack's warriors, and behind them, Aaron's breath caught. Kale strode into the clearing, his gray eyes taking in the scene instantly. He looked at the stranger, at Elder Thorn working over him, and finally at Aaron. She couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if he was angry or disappointed or something else entirely. Report, he said, his alpha voice brooking no argument. Elder Thorn spoke first. Feywolf, probably from the Northern Territories based on his scent markers. Cursed blade wound, professional job. He would have been dead in another 20 minutes if young Aaron here hadn't found him. Sienna's eyes narrowed, and she chose to stay with him instead of completing her test. She called for help like any sensible wolf would do in an emergency, Thorn countered, a hint of steel in his voice. The test measures judgment, doesn't it? Before Sienna could respond, the stranger gasped, his eyes flying open. They locked onto Kale immediately, and he tried to sit up despite Thorn's restraining hand. Alpha, he rasped. You need to hear the test. Sabotaged. Ambush waiting. Near the eastern stream. The clearing went deathly silent. Kale moved forward in one fluid motion, kneeling beside the stranger. Explain. Quickly. The stranger's words came in halting bursts, broken by pain, but the story he told turned Aaron's blood to ice. A faction within the pack, he didn't know who, working with enemies from outside. They'd arranged for the young wolves to walk into an ambush during the test, to be taken or eliminated, weakening the pack's future. The stranger, a liaison from the Fey courts sent to warn Silvermoon, had been intercepted and left for dead. The eastern stream, he repeated. That's where the main force waits. But there are others, scattered throughout the hunting grounds. They know your territories. They know where the young ones would go. Kyle's expression had gone from stone to glacier. He turned to Sienna. Sound the recall. Now, get every young wolf back to pack grounds immediately. Sienna didn't hesitate, throwing her head back and letting out the alpha's recall, a sound that every pack member was bound to obey. The warriors with her scattered into the forest to spread the word and help round up any stragglers. But Kale stayed, his eyes moving to Aaron. She stood there, covered in the stranger's blood, her test abandoned, her future uncertain. She waited for the judgment she knew must be coming. Instead, Kale asked quietly, How did you find him? I smelled blood. Something wrong. I went to investigate and... Aaron's voice trailed off. How could she explain the pull she'd felt, the certainty that this was important? You were supposed to be hunting. I know. You called for help instead of returning to warn the pack. He was dying. I didn't think he'd survive the journey back. And I didn't know if anyone would believe his warning without him alive to give it. It sounded weak even to her own ears, full of the uncertainty that always plagued her. But Kale's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You chose to save a life rather than secure your own future. Aaron looked at her feet. I chose wrong, didn't I? If he'd died, no one would have known about the trap until it was too late. And even now, I have no proof beyond his word. I should have. Stop. Kale's voice was firm, but not harsh. He stepped closer, and Aaron found herself looking up into those gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. You made a choice that most wolves wouldn't have the courage to make. You put the pack's welfare, even unknowingly, above your own advancement. That's not wrong, Aaron. That's exactly what we need. She blinked, certain she'd misheard. But the test measures judgment and commitment to the pack, Kale interrupted. You showed both tonight. Unconventionally, perhaps, but effectively. He glanced back at the stranger, whom Thorn was now carefully bandaging. If what he says is true, you may have saved not just his life, but the lives of every young wolf out there tonight. And if he's lying? Aaron whispered. Kyle's jaw tightened. Then we'll deal with that too. But somehow, he looked at her again. And this time there was something in his expression that made her heart skip. Something warm and wondering that she'd never seen directed at her before. Somehow, I don't think you'd have stayed with him if you thought he was deceiving us. You have good instincts, even if you don't trust them yet. Before Aaron could process that, the sound of returning wolves filled the clearing. The young hunters emerged from the forest in groups, some confused, some annoyed at the interruption, a few carrying their kills. They saw the stranger, saw Aaron covered in blood, saw the alpha himself standing in the clearing, and the questions started immediately. Kale raised his hand for silence, and the effect was instantaneous. There has been a threat made against the pack, he announced, his voice carrying to every wolf present. The critical test is suspended pending investigation. All young wolves will return to pack grounds immediately. Hunters and warriors, begin a full sweep of our territory. I want to know if we have intruders, and I want them found. Marcus, still carrying the deer he'd successfully brought down, looked confused. But Alpha, the test, is suspended, Kale repeated, his tone allowing no argument. There will be time for questions later. Right now, we have a pack to protect. As the young wolves began to move, some reluctantly abandoning their kills, Lysa pushed through to Aaron's side. Are you okay? She whispered. What happened? Is that blood yours? I'm fine, Aaron assured her. I'll explain later. I think. Maybe. In truth, she wasn't sure what she'd explain, because she wasn't entirely sure what had happened herself. The pack began the journey back to pack grounds, a somber procession so different from the excited departure hours earlier. Aaron found herself walking near the front, close to where Elder Thorn and two warriors carried the stranger on a makeshift stretcher. Kyle walked beside them, his presence a steady anchor in the confusion. More than once, Aaron caught other young wolves staring at her, some curious, some resentful, some with expressions she couldn't read at all. She'd interrupted their test, cast doubt on their achievements, all because of a stranger and a story that might not even be true. Doubt crept back in, cold and familiar. What if she'd made the wrong choice? What if the stranger was wrong, or lying, or deluded from the poison? She'd abandoned the test, failed to prove herself, all for— Stop thinking so loud, a voice said beside her. Aaron jumped, not having noticed Kale fall into step with her. He kept his eyes forward, but there was the ghost of a smile on his lips. I can practically hear your thoughts from here. I'm not— You're second-guessing yourself, wondering if you made the right choice, expecting everyone to be angry with you. Now he did look at her, and his expression was gentler than she'd ever seen it. Am I wrong? Aaron couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just shook her head. Kyle sighed. Aryan, do you know why I became alpha at 24, younger than any alpha in 3 generations? She shook her head again. Because I made a choice that everyone told me was wrong. The old alpha, my father, was sick, dying, though no one wanted to admit it. Pack law said he should remain alpha until death. That challenging him would be betrayal. But I could see what his weakness was doing to the pack, could see other packs starting to view us as vulnerable. So I challenged him. His voice was steady, but Aaron could hear the old pain underneath. My own father, in front of the entire pack. That must have been horrible, Aaron whispered. It was necessary. He agreed to step down before the challenge could become a fight. Said he was proud of me for putting the pack first, even above our blood bond. Kyle's gray eyes met hers. The point is, leadership isn't about following rules. It's about knowing when to break them for the right reasons. You did that tonight. I didn't mean to, Aaron admitted. I couldn't leave him there. I know. That's what makes it matter. They walked in silence for a moment, the pack grounds coming into view through the trees ahead. Aaron could see lights blazing, could hear the sound of urgent activity as word of the situation spread. Alpha Kale, she said quietly. If the stranger is right, if someone in the pack is working against us, how do we find them? His expression hardened. Very carefully, but we will find them. I promise you that. He paused, then added, And Aaron, when we do, when this is over and the pack is safe again, we're going to talk about your future. because tonight showed me something important. You're more than you think you are. And it's time the rest of the pack saw it too. Before Aaron could respond, they'd reached the pack grounds, and chaos swallowed them both. The next few hours passed in a blur. The stranger, who finally introduced himself as Darien of the Northern Fey Courts, was taken to the Healer's Lodge. The young wolves were gathered in the main hall and told to wait. Warriors spread out through the territory, searching for signs of the intruders Darien had warned about, and Aaron found herself summoned to the Alpha's council room, where Kale and the pack's senior leadership were assembled. She stood before them, small and uncertain, while they debated her fate and Darien's warnings in voices that sometimes rose to near shouts. She abandoned the test, Elder Mordecai insisted. Regardless of her reasons, there must be consequences. She saved a life and potentially exposed a plot against the pack, Beta Thorn countered. That deserves commendation, not punishment. We don't know that there was a plot, Sienna pointed out, though her voice was less certain than usual. Until we find proof. We have proof. A warrior burst into the room, breathing hard. We found signs of a camp near the eastern stream. At least a dozen individuals, maybe more. Cleared out in a hurry, but they left traces, weapons, plans, and these. He laid several items on the table. Aaron's blood ran cold. They were pack symbols, tokens that identified their bearers as Silver Moon wolves. But the scent on them was wrong, altered, designed to fool tracking. Someone gave them access to our territory, Kale said, his voice deadly quiet. Someone told them where the young wolves would be. The room fell silent. Every wolf present understood what that meant. Traitor. They had a traitor in the pack. Elder Mordecai's face had gone pale. Then the girl— Aaron, Kyle corrected firmly. Her name is Aaron. And yes, she likely saved us from a catastrophe tonight. He turned to where Aaron stood, trembling slightly from exhaustion and stress. The pack owes you a debt, Aaron of Silver Moon. Your choice tonight, difficult as it must have been, may have preserved our future. I didn't know, Aaron whispered. He needed help. Sometimes that's enough, Kyle said. And when he smiled at her, a real smile, warm and genuine, Aaron felt something shift in her chest, a flutter of something she didn't dare name. As for the test, Kale continued, addressing the full council now, it will be rescheduled once we've secured our territory and identified the traitors among us. But Aaron's status is not in question. She has proven herself in the way that matters most. Elder Mordecai looked like he wanted to argue, but even he couldn't deny the evidence laid before them. Finally, he nodded stiffly. So be it. The meeting continued, but Aaron was dismissed, sent to get rest and recovery. She left the council room in a daze, her mind struggling to process everything that had happened. 1 day ago, she'd been the pack's weakest link. Now she was being praised for abandoning the test that was supposed to prove her worth. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice someone following her until a hand touched her shoulder. Aaron spun, heart racing, only to find Kale standing behind her in the empty corridor. Sorry, he said, withdrawing his hand. Didn't mean to startle you. It's okay. I was just— Aaron gestured vaguely, unable to articulate the confusion swirling in her head. Kyle studied her for a moment, and Aaron noticed, not for the first time, but perhaps most acutely, how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill the space around him. When he spoke, his voice was softer than it had been in the council room. You did well tonight, Aaron. I meant what I said in there. I just did what felt right, she said honestly. I didn't think about consequences or the pack or anything, really. I just couldn't leave him. That's what makes it remarkable. Kyle took a step closer, and Aaron's breath caught. Most wolves would have weighed the options, calculated the benefits and costs. You just acted from the heart. That's rare. That's reckless, Aaron corrected, managing a weak smile. Maybe, or maybe it's exactly what we need. His gray eyes held hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them in that quiet corridor. Get some rest. Tomorrow we have a traitor to find, and I'm going to need wolves I can trust absolutely. He started to turn away, then paused. Aaron, for what it's worth, I'm glad it was you who found Darien tonight. I don't think anyone else would have made the choice you did. And I think— He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. I think that matters more than you know. Then he was gone, leaving Aaron alone with her racing thoughts and the echo of words that felt like they meant something more than their surface suggested. She made her way to her quarters, her body exhausted, but her mind spinning. Tomorrow would bring investigations and interrogations, questions and accusations. Tomorrow, the pack would begin hunting for the wolves who'd betrayed them. Tomorrow, everything would change again. But tonight, as Erin finally collapsed onto her bed, she allowed herself one small smile. She'd failed the test in the most spectacular way possible, and somehow, impossibly, she'd done something right. Outside her window, the moon reached its zenith, marking the end of what should have been the critical test. But for Aaron, it felt more like a beginning. Of what? She couldn't yet say. She only knew that when dawn came, when Alpha Kale came looking for answers and allies, she would be ready. Ready to face whatever came next. Ready to be more than the shy beta everyone expected. Ready, perhaps, to be exactly who she was always meant to be. Dawn broke over Silver Moon territory with fingers of pale gold light that painted the forest in shades of amber and rose. Kale stood at the edge of the pack grounds, his eyes fixed on the tree line where darkness still clung to the spaces between trunks. He hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Not with the weight of last night's revelations pressing down on his shoulders like a physical burden. Behind him, the pack grounds hummed with subdued activity. Warriors changed shifts. Healers tended to the still unconscious Darien. Council members whispered in tight clusters, their voices tense with speculation and suspicion. Everyone looking at everyone else, wondering who among them had betrayed the pack. But Kale's thoughts kept circling back to one person. One wolf who'd thrown herself into danger without hesitation, who'd made an impossible choice and somehow, impossibly, made the right one. Aaron. He'd sent scouts to check on all the young wolves after last night's chaos, to ensure everyone had returned safely and was accounted for. Everyone had been found, except one. Erin had left her quarters sometime before dawn, and no one had seen where she'd gone. Most of the council assumed she'd gone to the healing lodge to check on Darien, or perhaps to the gardens where she often retreated when overwhelmed. But Kale knew better. He'd seen the look in her eyes last night, the confusion, the doubt, the need to understand what had happened. Aaron wouldn't rest until she'd returned to the place where everything had changed, trying to make sense of it all. And that place, Kale knew with a certainty that bypassed logic, was dangerous. Alpha. Beta Commander Sienna approached from behind, her footsteps nearly silent even on the gravel path. The perimeter patrols are reporting nothing unusual. Whoever was at that camp near the eastern stream is long gone. They'll be back, Kyle said quietly. Whatever they were planning, we only delayed it. They won't give up that easily. Sienna moved to stand beside him, following his gaze toward the forest. You're going after her. It wasn't a question. Sienna had known him since they were cubs, had fought beside him during his challenge for Alpha. She could read him better than almost anyone. Someone needs to, Kyle said. You could send warriors, or scouts. You don't need to go personally. Sienna paused, then added carefully, unless this isn't just about pack security. Kale shot her a warning look, but Sienna just raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. One of the benefits of old friendship. She was one of the few wolves who could challenge him without it being a formal challenge. She's vulnerable right now, Kale said, choosing his words carefully. Everyone's going to be watching her, questioning her, wondering if she knew more than she said. The shy ones always get overlooked until suddenly they're the center of attention, and then... He stopped, realizing he was revealing more than he intended. Sienna's expression softened. You've been watching her for a long time, haven't you? Kyle didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, keep the council busy. Tell them I'm investigating the site where Darien was attacked, looking for clues about who did it. That's not entirely untrue. And when you find Erin, then I'll bring her back. After we talk. He started toward the tree line, then paused. Sienna? Make sure Darien is guarded. If someone in the pack wanted him dead badly enough to use a cursed blade, they might try again. Already done. Thorn has 3 of our best warriors posted outside the healing lodge. Sienna studied him for a moment. Be careful, Kale. We don't know who we can trust right now. I know who I can trust, Kale said quietly. And then he was moving. shifting mid-stride into his wolf form and disappearing into the forest. The transformation was instantaneous, a seamless flow from human to wolf that came from years of practice and the power inherent in his alpha bloodline. His wolf was larger than most, his coat a deep charcoal gray that was almost black in shadow, and his eyes, the same storm gray whether human or wolf, missed nothing as he loped through the undergrowth. Aaron's scent was easy to find. She'd passed this way less than an hour ago, moving quickly but not frantically, following her own path from last night, he realized, retracing her steps to the clearing where she'd found Darian. As he ran, memories rose unbidden in Cale's mind, memories he usually kept carefully locked away. 8 years ago, Cale at 20, newly appointed beta to his father's alpha, eager to prove himself, and Aaron at 14, a shy, gangly adolescent who spent more time in the gardens than the training grounds. "You need to be more aggressive," the training master had barked at her. "A wolf who hesitates is a wolf who dies." Cale had been passing by on his way to meet with the scouts. When he'd heard the commotion, he'd paused at the edge of the training field, watching as young Aaron faced off against Marcus, even then confident and strong, in a sparring match. Marcus had moved first, fast and hard, and Aaron had dodged rather than meeting the attack head-on. Again and again, she'd evaded, never striking back, until Marcus had finally landed a blow that sent her sprawling. "Pathetic," the training master had sneered. "At this rate, you'll never be anything but dead weight to the pack." Cale had seen the way Aaron's face had crumpled, the way she'd fought back tears, and something in him, something he hadn't fully understood at the time, had snapped. "That's enough," he'd said, stepping onto the field. The training master had straightened immediately, recognizing the beta's authority. Everyone else dismissed. "Aaron, stay." When the others had gone, Aaron had stood before him with her head down, shoulders hunched in anticipation of further criticism. Instead, Cale had asked, "Why didn't you fight back?" I couldn't." Her voice had been barely a whisper. "Every time I tried, I just kept thinking about hurting him, and I couldn't." "You were afraid of causing harm. I know it's weak. I know I should be stronger, more aggressive, like everyone says." "Stop." Cale had crouched down to her eye level. "Aaron, look at me." When she'd finally met his eyes, he'd continued, "Compassion isn't weakness, but you need to learn to balance it with strength. Being unwilling to hurt someone who's attacking you in training could get you hurt badly in a real fight." "I know. I don't know how." Cale had made a decision then, one that would ripple through the years that followed. "Then I'll teach you. Tomorrow, before regular training, meet me here." Her eyes had gone wide. "You want to train me personally? Someone should. And it might as well be someone who understands that there are different kinds of strength." Those private training sessions had continued for months. Cale teaching Aaron not to suppress her gentle nature but to work with it, to use her natural evasiveness as a tactical advantage, to strike only when necessary, but effectively when she did. Watching her grow in confidence, seeing the way she moved with increasing grace and purpose. And somewhere along the way, his feelings had shifted from a beta's responsibility for a young pack member to something far more complicated. He'd been 21 when he'd first realized he was attracted to her. Aaron had been 15, too young, and the realization had horrified him. So he'd done the only thing he could. He'd distanced himself, ended the training sessions, avoided her except in official pack gatherings, told himself it was inappropriate, impossible that she was too young and he had too many responsibilities. But the feelings hadn't gone away. They'd just gone underground, a constant presence he'd learned to ignore, or tried to. 3 years ago, Kyle at 25, a year into his role as alpha. Aaron at 18, fully grown but still shy, still overlooked by most of the pack. There had been a gathering to celebrate the summer solstice, and Cale had been fulfilling his duty as alpha, moving through the crowd, speaking with everyone. He'd found Aaron sitting alone at the edge of the celebration, her eyes on the dancers but her expression distant. Without thinking, he'd sat beside her. "You're not dancing," he'd observed. "Neither are you," she'd replied, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Alphas don't dance at pack gatherings. We observe and make sure everyone else is having a good time." "That sounds lonely." The The simple observation had struck him harder than it should have. Sometimes leadership is lonely. Aaron had looked at him then, really looked at him, and Kale had felt exposed in a way he rarely did. "You don't have to be lonely," she'd said softly. "There are wolves who would stand beside you if you let them." "Is that an offer?" The words had escaped before he could stop them. Too revealing, too raw. She'd blushed, looking away. I'm not the kind of wolf an alpha would choose. I'm just Aaron." He'd waited until she met his eyes again. "You're more than you think you are. I wish you could see yourself the way—" He'd stopped, realizing he was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. "The way others see you." But she'd heard what he didn't say. He'd seen it in the way her breath had caught, in the widening of her eyes. The moment had stretched between them, heavy with possibility. And then Elder Mordecai had called him away to deal with some dispute, and the moment had shattered. By the time he'd returned, Aaron was gone. He hadn't been alone with her since. The memories faded as Kyle approached the clearing where Darian had been found. He slowed, his senses alert for any sign of danger, but the forest was quiet. Too quiet. Even the birds had fallen silent. Then he saw her. Aaron stood in human form at the base of the same ancient oak where Darian had lain dying. She was studying something on the ground, her brow furrowed in concentration. Dawn light filtered through the canopy above, turning her silver-gray hair to spun platinum and casting her face in soft focus. Kyle shifted back to human form as he approached, making enough noise that she wouldn't be startled. Aaron looked up, and for a moment, something flashed in her eyes. Surprise? Yes, but also something warmer, something that made his chest tighten. "Alpha Kyle," she said, straightening. "I didn't expect—" "Just Kyle," he interrupted. "When it's just us, you can call me Kale." She blinked, clearly uncertain how to respond to that. Okay, Kale." The name sounded tentative on her lips, like she was testing its weight. He moved closer, his eyes scanning the clearing. "You came back." "I needed to see it again, in daylight. I thought maybe I missed something last night, something that could help us figure out who attacked Darian." She gestured to the ground around the oak. "And I was right. Look." Kale knelt beside her, following her pointing finger. Tracks in the soft earth, partially obscured by leaves but still visible if you knew what to look for. Boot prints, not paw prints. Multiple individuals. "They were here," Aaron said, her voice tight. "Whoever attacked Darian, they stood right here. And these tracks—" She pointed to another set, leading away from the tree. "They're fresh, from this morning. Someone came back." Kyle's blood ran cold. "You shouldn't be here alone. If they came back and found you—" "I was careful. I've been watching for any signs of—" She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening as she looked past him. "Kale, behind you." He spun, every instinct screaming danger, but there was nothing there. Just trees and shadows and— The attack came from above. A figure dropped from the branches overhead, blade gleaming in the morning light. Kale moved on instinct, shifting partially, his wolf's strength and reflexes in human form, and caught the attacker's wrist before the blade could connect. They grappled, a blur of motion, and Kale realized with shock that he recognized the scent. Thomas, one of the pack's younger warriors, someone Kale had trusted. "Why?" Kale growled, using his alpha strength to force Thomas back. "Why betray us?" Thomas's eyes were wild, desperate. "You don't understand. They promised us power, promised us—" He broke off, twisting with surprising speed, and suddenly Aaron was there, having circled around during the fight. She didn't hesitate this time. Her foot swept Thomas's legs out from under him, and when he fell, she was on him, one knee on his back, pinning him down with a competence that surprised even Kale. "The training stuck," Kyle observed, unable to keep the pride from his voice. Aaron flashed him a quick smile, the first real smile he'd seen from her in years. "Good teacher." Thomas bucked underneath her, trying to throw her off, but Kyle was there in an instant, adding his weight to hold the traitor down. "Who are they?" he demanded. "Who promised you power?" "I won't tell you anything," Thomas spat. "The pack is weak under your leadership. Change is coming and—" He never finished the sentence. His body suddenly convulsed, foam appearing at his lips. Kyle swore, recognizing the signs immediately. Poison. A capsule hidden in a false tooth, probably. triggered when Thomas realized he'd been caught. "No, no, no," Erin breathed, her hands moving to check Thomas's pulse even as his body went still. "He's dead," Cale confirmed grimly. They planned for this. Anyone caught was supposed to choose death over capture. Erin sat back, her face pale. That's fanaticism. What could possibly make someone so devoted to a cause that they'd rather die than be questioned? I don't know. Kyle looked down at Thomas's body, feeling the weight of failure settle on his shoulders. Another wolf lost, another question unanswered. But we need to find out, because if Thomas was willing to die for this, there are probably others who feel the same way. He pulled out a small horn from his belt and blew 2 sharp notes, the signal for assistance needed. Within minutes, warriors would arrive to secure the scene and take Thomas's body back for examination. Erin stood slowly, her hands shaking slightly. "I led you into a trap. If I hadn't asked you to look at those tracks, you didn't know he was there," Kyle said firmly. "Neither did I, and we handled it." He moved closer, unable to stop himself from reaching out to steady her, his hands on her shoulders grounding her. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine. Just—" She looked up at him, and this close, Cale could see flecks of amber in her hazel eyes. "I've never seen someone die before. Not like that. I'm sorry you had to see it now." They stood like that for a moment, closer than they'd been in years, and Cale felt the years of distance between them like a physical ache. He wanted to tell her about the training sessions, about the solstice gathering, about all the times he'd watched her from afar and wished things were different. But the words stuck in his throat, held back by duty and propriety and the knowledge that she deserved better than an alpha, whose attention was always divided between her and the pack. Erin was the one who stepped back, breaking the moment. "The warriors will be here soon. We should document what we found, before anyone else disturbs the scene." Cale nodded, grateful for the excuse to focus on something practical. Together, they examined the clearing more carefully, marking the boot prints, finding evidence of a hastily abandoned surveillance post in the trees above. Thomas had been watching this spot, waiting for someone to return, waiting for Erin. The realization made Cale's blood boil. They knew you'd come back. They were counting on it. "Why me specifically?" Erin asked, confusion clear in her voice. "I'm nobody special. Why would they—" "Because you're the one who found Darian." Cale's mind was racing, pieces clicking into place. "You're the one who disrupted their plans, and they can't afford to have you asking questions, looking for answers. You're a threat to them now." Erin laughed, the sound bitter. "Me? A threat? I'm the pack's shy beta who can barely speak up in council meetings." "You're the wolf who saved a dying stranger when everyone else was focused on their own advancement," Cale corrected. "You're the wolf who saw what others missed, who made the hard choice without hesitation. Don't you see, Erin? That makes you dangerous to anyone who relies on pack members following orders without question." She stared at him, and Kyle saw the moment his words really landed, saw her starting to reassess herself, to see herself through a different lens. It was both beautiful and heartbreaking to watch. The sound of approaching wolves made them both turn. Warriors emerged from the forest, led by Sienna, their expressions grim when they saw Thomas's body. "He attacked you?" Sienna asked, moving immediately to examine the scene. "He was waiting here," Cale explained, watching the site. "When we discovered his surveillance post, he made his move, and when we caught him, he took poison rather than talk." Sienna's expression darkened. "Thomas. I trained with him as a cub. His family has been Silver Moon for 4 generations. She looked at Kyle. "How deep does this betrayal go? Deep enough that we can't trust anyone without question." Kyle glanced at Erin, saw the fear flickering in her eyes, and made a decision. "Erin, you'll stay close to me from now on. If they're targeting you specifically, you need protection. I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm telling you. As your alpha." He softened his tone. "Please, Erin. Let me keep you safe." She searched his face for a long moment, and Cale wondered what she saw there. Finally, she nodded. "Okay." Sienna was directing the warriors, securing the scene, preparing to transport Thomas's body, but she shot Cale a knowing look that he pointedly ignored. He'd deal with Sienna's observations later. "There's something else," Aaron said suddenly. She moved to the base of the oak tree, running her hands over the bark. Look at this. These marks. Kale joined her, peering at scratches in the wood that he'd initially dismissed as natural damage. But looking closer, he could see they formed a pattern. A symbol. Do you recognize it? Aaron asked. Kale's jaw tightened. Yes. It's the mark of the Shadowfang Collective. The name hung in the air like a curse. The Shadowfang Collective, a group of wolf supremacists who believed the old ways were being corrupted, who thought packs should rule by strength alone, without treaties or alliances with other supernatural beings. They'd been quiet for years, their influence supposedly waning, but clearly they'd been working in secret, building power, recruiting wolves who felt overlooked or undervalued. They're behind this? Aaron's voice was small. But they're just a radical fringe group. Aren't they? They were. Or we thought they were. Kyle studied the symbol, his mind racing through implications. But if they've infiltrated Silver Moon deeply enough to sabotage the critical test, to convince wolves like Thomas to betray everything they know. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Sienna had joined them, her face grave. We need to call a full pack assembly. If Shadowfang has members within our ranks, we need to root them out before they can do more damage. Agreed. But we need to be smart about it. Kyle turned to face both women. If we reveal everything we know, the conspirators will go to ground or escape. We need to make them think they're still hidden, that we're flailing in the dark. A trap, Aaron said quietly. You want to set a trap for them. Kyle looked at her, impressed despite the grim circumstances. Yes. But it will require bait. Something or someone they want badly enough to expose themselves for. Me, Aaron said before anyone else could speak. They already tried to eliminate me once. If we let them think they succeeded in scaring me away, that I'm isolated and vulnerable, they might try again. Absolutely not, Kale said immediately. I won't use you as bait. It's not your choice. Aaron's voice was steady, stronger than he'd ever heard it. This is my pack too, and if I can help protect it, I will. They stared at each other, wills clashing, and Kyle felt something shift between them. This wasn't the shy adolescent he'd trained years ago. This was a wolf coming into her own power, discovering her strength. It was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. If we do this, he said slowly, you won't be alone for a second. I'll have guards on you at all times. Hidden guards, Aaron countered. It has to look like I'm vulnerable. No. Kale? I said no, Aaron. I'm not risking you like that. His voice came out rougher than intended, betraying more emotion than he meant to show. You don't understand what could happen if, then help me understand. She moved closer, her eyes searching his. Why are you so determined to protect me specifically? I'm just one wolf among many. If this were Marcus or Lysa or anyone else, would you be this adamant about keeping them safe? The question hung between them, dangerous and revelatory. Kale was aware of Sienna watching them, of the other warriors pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. He should deflect, should fall back on his alpha authority and end the discussion. Instead, he said quietly, no, I wouldn't, because they're not you. Aaron's breath caught. What does that mean? Before Kale could answer, before he could say something he couldn't take back, a howl split the morning air, the distress call, coming from the direction of pack grounds. All three of them shifted instantly, racing through the forest toward the sound. Other wolves joined them, warriors and scouts converging on the pack grounds from all directions. Kale's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Another attack? Multiple attacks? How many traitors were there? They burst into the central clearing to find chaos. Wolves in both human and animal form clustered around the healing lodge, their voices raised in alarm and anger. Kale pushed through the crowd, his alpha presence clearing a path, until he could see what had caused the commotion. The healing lodge door hung open, torn from its hinges. Inside, the space had been ransacked, herbs scattered, supplies overturned. And in the center of the destruction lay one of the guards Sienna had posted, unconscious but breathing. But Darian, the Fey Wolf stranger whose warnings had started everything, was gone. Elder Thorn pushed through the crowd, his healer's bag clutched in trembling hands. They took him. Somehow they got past the guards, past the protections I'd laid. They took him. How long ago? Cale demanded, his voice carrying across the clearing, cutting through the panicked conversations. No more than 20 minutes, Thorne replied. I'd stepped away to gather more supplies for his treatment. When I returned, he gestured helplessly at the destruction. Which direction? Sienna was already organizing tracking parties, her training kicking in. Unknown, they covered their scent somehow, used something to mask their trail. Thorne looked at Cale with haunted eyes. I'm sorry, Alpha. I should have stayed with him, should have. This isn't your fault, Kyle said, though his mind was racing. Whoever had taken Darien had planned this carefully, had known exactly when to strike and how to evade detection, which meant they'd been watching, waiting for the right moment. Everyone who was here when it happened, I need you to describe exactly what you saw, smelled, heard. Even the smallest detail might help. As pack members began offering their observations, Aaron moved to stand beside Cale. He felt her presence like a physical warmth at his side, grounding him when everything else was spinning into chaos. They're trying to keep him from talking more, she said quietly, her voice pitched for his ears only. Whatever else he knows, whatever details he didn't have time to share last night, they're desperate to make sure it stays secret. Which means there's more to this than just the sabotage test. Cale's jaw tightened. They're planning something bigger. And we just lost our best source of information about what. Aaron turned to look at him, and he saw his own frustration and determination reflected in her eyes. So what do we do? It was the we that got him. Not, what will you do, or what should the pack do, but we, as if they were partners in this, as if she saw herself standing beside him rather than following behind. We adapt, Cale said, making his decision. If they want to make this a war of shadows, we'll learn to fight in darkness. But first, he raised his voice, addressing the assembled pack. First, we secure our home. No one travels alone. All patrols double their numbers. Any wolf who seems suspicious, any behavior that's out of character, you report it immediately to me or Beta Commander Sienna. We will find who did this, and we will make them answer for it. The pack responded with howls of agreement, anger, and determination mixing in their voices. They were frightened, yes, but they were also united. For now, at least. As the crowd began to disperse, wolves moving to their assigned tasks, Cale felt a hand on his arm. Aaron, her touch light, but insistent. You never answered my question, she said, before we were interrupted. Why me specifically? Cale looked down at her, at this wolf who'd spent so long trying to be invisible, and was now standing at the center of a storm. He could deflect again, could hide behind duty and propriety like he'd been doing for years. Or he could be honest. Because I've been watching you for a long time, Aaron, he said quietly. Because somewhere between teaching you to fight and watching you grow into who you are now, you became important to me. More important than is probably wise for an alpha to admit. He saw her eyes widen, saw the shock and something else, hope maybe, flash across her face. So yes, I'm protective of you specifically, and no, I won't apologize for it. For a moment, Erin just stared at him, her lips parted in surprise. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she said, I've been watching you too, for longer than you might think. Before Cale could process that, could ask what she meant, Sienna was calling his name, needing decisions about patrol routes and security measures. The Alpha's duties pulled him away, but as he turned to handle the next crisis, he caught Erin's eye one more time. She smiled at him, tentative but real, and Cale felt something in his chest loosen slightly. They were in the middle of a conspiracy that threatened to tear the pack apart. There was a traitor in their midst, maybe multiple traitors. A dying stranger had been stolen from right under their noses, and they had no idea what larger plan was unfolding around them. But for just that moment, with Aaron's smile warming him from the inside out, Cale let himself feel something other than duty and responsibility. Let himself feel hope. The day stretched ahead, full of investigations and interrogations, of tracking parties and security checks. But Cale knew that when it was over, when the immediate crisis had been managed, he and Aaron would finish their interrupted conversation, and maybe, just maybe, They'd finally stopped dancing around feelings that had been growing for far too long. The game was in motion now. The Shadowfang Collective had made their move, and Silver Moon would respond. But as Kale watched Aren move to help organize the younger wolves, saw the way she held herself with new confidence despite her lingering uncertainty, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, whatever battles lay ahead, he wouldn't face them alone. Not anymore. Dawn had come looking for answers and found something far more important. A partner, an equal, a wolf who saw him not just as Alpha but as Kale. And in the middle of chaos and conspiracy, that felt like the beginning of something worth fighting for. The ancient library in the heart of Pack Grounds had stood for 3 centuries, its walls lined with records and treaties that predated living memory. Kyle and Aren stood before a dust-covered tome, the symbol from the oak tree matching perfectly with the mark on the yellowed pages. "The Treaty of Shadow and Light," Aren read aloud, her finger tracing the faded text. "Signed 200 years ago between Silver Moon Pack and the Northern Fae Courts." She looked up at Kyle. Darian mentioned a pact that was breaking. This must be it. Kyle leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers as he read over her shoulder. The proximity sent warmth through Aren's chest, but she forced herself to focus. "It says here that the treaty binds our peoples in mutual protection. If one is threatened, the other must aid them. But there's a clause." He pointed to a section written in different ink, clearly added later. "The treaty requires renewal every generation through a ritual of trust." "When was it last renewed?" Aren asked, though dread was already pooling in her stomach. 25 years ago." Kyle's voice was grim. It should have been renewed 5 years past. Someone deliberately let it lapse. The pieces clicked together in Aren's mind with sudden, terrible clarity. The test wasn't just sabotage to hurt our young wolves. It was meant to violate the treaty completely. If we'd attacked the Fae representatives they'd hidden among the prey, it would have been seen as an act of war, Kale finished. The treaty would have shattered completely, and the Shadowfang Collective could claim the old ways were the only way forward. He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense. "Aren, you didn't just save Darian. You prevented a war." The weight of it hit her all at once. Her small choice, made from nothing but compassion, had held back catastrophe. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I just wanted to help him. That's what makes it matter." Kyle's hand came up, gentle against her cheek, and Aren's breath caught. "You acted from the heart when everyone else was following their heads. That kind of instinct, that kind of courage." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "I came looking for you at dawn not because duty demanded it, but because I couldn't bear not knowing you were safe. Because somewhere in the years I've known you, you've become essential to me." Kale, his name on her lips felt like a confession. "I know the pack expects their alpha to be above such feelings," he continued, his thumb brushing her cheekbone, "but I'm tired of pretending you don't matter to me. Tired of watching from a distance when all I want?" The library door burst open with explosive force. Elder Mordecai stood in the doorway, but his usual stern expression had twisted into something darker, more desperate. In his hand gleamed a silver blade, the same cursed weapon that had nearly killed Darian. "I'm sorry, Alpha," Mordecai said, and he actually sounded regretful. "But you've discovered too much. Too quickly. The collective can't allow—" Kyle moved with Alpha speed, pushing Aren behind him as he shifted partially, claws extending. It was you all along. For the good of the pack," Mordecai insisted, advancing slowly. "These treaties with lesser beings weaken us. We should rule, not negotiate. The old ways were stronger, purer. The old ways led to endless war," Kale countered, circling to keep himself between Mordecai and Aren. "You've betrayed everything Silver Moon stands for." "I've tried to save it," Mordecai's voice rose to a shout. "And I would have succeeded if she—" He gestured viciously at Aren. "Hadn't interfered. One shy little wolf, disrupting years of planning." Aren felt anger override her fear. "Where's Darian? What did you do with him?" Mordecai smiled, cold and terrible. "The Fey Wolf is being held by our allies. Insurance to ensure the Fey courts don't interfere while we cleanse the pack of Alpha Kale's weakness. Starting now." He lunged with supernatural speed, the cursed blade aimed at Kale's heart. But Kale was faster, catching Mordecai's wrist and twisting. They crashed into the bookshelf, ancient texts tumbling around them. Erin didn't freeze this time. She grabbed a heavy tome and brought it down hard on Mordecai's arm, making him drop the blade. It clattered across the floor, and she kicked it away, far from reaching hands. "Guards!" Kyle's alpha command boomed through the building. "To the library!" Mordecai fought with desperate strength, but age had weakened him where it had honed Kyle. Within moments, warriors burst through the door, and the elder was subdued, forced to his knees. "How many others?" Kyle demanded, his hand still gripping Mordecai's collar. "How deep does the collective's influence go?" Mordecai's laugh was bitter. "Deep enough that you'll never root us all out. We're everywhere, Alpha. In your guard, your council, your—" Sienna's voice cut through from the doorway. "Actually, we've been listening to everything." She held up a small device, one of the communication crystals the pack used. "Your confession has been broadcast to the entire pack. Everyone heard you admit to treason, to kidnapping, to attempted murder of your alpha." The color drained from Mordecai's face as he realized what had happened. Kale had planned this, had suspected and laid a trap, and the elder had walked right into it. As warriors led Mordecai away, Kale turned to Aaron, pulling her close in a fierce embrace. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm okay." She pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heart racing as fast as hers. "Is it over? The conspiracy? Not yet, but we've cut off its head." Kyle pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "And we know where they're holding Darian. Mordecai's allies won't be expecting us to move this quickly." Aaron straightened, new determination filling her. "Then let's go get him back and finish this." Kale's smile was fierce and proud. Together, as they strode from the library, warriors falling into formation around them, Aaron felt the last of her old uncertainty burn away. She wasn't the shy beta anymore. She was a wolf who'd changed the pack's fate, who stood beside her alpha as an equal. And together, they would save Darian, stop the Shadowfang Collective, and build a future neither of them had to face alone. The final battle was coming, but this time, Aaron was ready. The abandoned mining complex at the northern border stood silent against the night sky. Kale led 20 of his best warriors through the shadows, with Aaron at his side. Mordecai's interrogation had revealed everything: the location where Darian was held, the names of the remaining conspirators, and the collective's final desperate plan. "They'll expect us," Sienna whispered from Kale's other side. "This could be a trap." "It is a trap," Kale confirmed. "But we're walking into it with our eyes open this time." Aaron's sharp eyes caught movement near the main entrance. 3 guards, northeast corner, 2 more on the ridge. Her voice was steady, confident. The shy wolf who'd struggled to speak up was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth. Kyle signaled the warriors to spread out. "Remember, we want prisoners, not bodies. These are still our pack members, even if they've been misled." He looked at Aaron. "Ready?" She nodded, shifting into her wolf form. Together, they moved. The attack was swift and precise. Kyle's warriors neutralized the guards before alarms could be raised. Inside the complex, they found Darian chained in a central chamber, surrounded by a dozen Shadowfang members led by Thomas's brother, Eric. "You're too late, Alpha," Eric snarled. "Even now, our allies march on pack grounds. By dawn, Silvermoon will belong to the collective, and your weak treaties will be—" "Your allies have been captured," Kale interrupted calmly. "We've had teams securing pack grounds while you waited here for a rescue party that became a hunting party. It's over, Eric." Eric's face contorted with rage. "Never. The old ways will—" Aaron stepped forward, her voice cutting through his rant. "The old ways led to suffering and war. Strength isn't just about dominance, it's about wisdom, compassion, and unity. That's what you never understood." For a moment, the Shadowfang members wavered, doubt flickering in their eyes. They'd followed promises of power and glory, but faced with their alpha's certainty and the truth in Aaron's words, their conviction crumbled. One by one, they submitted, baring their necks in surrender. Eric was the last, his resistance breaking when he realized he stood alone. While Sienna secured the prisoners, Kale moved to free Darian. The Fey-wolf was weak but alive, his golden eyes grateful. "Thank you," he rasped. "The treaty will be renewed," Kyle assured him. "Properly this time. with full ceremony and both peoples present. You have my word. Darian's gaze shifted to Aaron. You saved me twice now. The Fae courts will remember the kindness of Aaron of Silvermoon. Aaron helped support him as they made their way out of the complex, just doing what felt right. That's why it matters, Darian replied, echoing Kale's words from days before. 3 days later, the pack gathered in the central clearing for a ceremony unlike any in recent memory. Representatives from the Northern Fae courts stood alongside Silvermoon wolves. The ancient treaty of shadow and light spread between them for renewal. But first came recognition. Kale stood on the speaking platform, his alpha presence commanding every eye. This pack has faced betrayal and darkness, he began, but we've also discovered light in unexpected places. One wolf, through simple compassion and courage, prevented war and saved us all. He extended his hand toward Aaron, who stood at the platform's edge, no longer trying to hide in the shadows. Aaron of Silvermoon, your actions have proven that strength comes in many forms. You saw what others missed, valued life over advancement, and stood firm when tested. The pack owes you a debt we can never fully repay. Aaron climbed the platform on shaking legs, but when she stood beside Kyle, she found her voice. I just followed my heart. Maybe that's what we all should do more often. Trust our instincts, value each other, and remember that the pack's strength lies in our unity, not our divisions. The assembled wolves howled their agreement, the sound rising to the sky like a promise. After the treaty was formally renewed and celebrations began, Kale found Aaron at the edge of the gathering, her old habit of seeking quiet spaces. But this time, when he approached, she smiled instead of shrinking away. Hiding from your own celebration? He asked, settling beside her. Just taking a moment. She looked up at the stars. Everything's changed so fast. A week ago, I was the pack's weakest link. Now I'm supposedly a hero. You were never weak, Kale said softly, just overlooked. There's a difference. Aaron turned to face him, her hazel eyes reflecting moonlight. You said something in the library, before Mordecai interrupted. About me being essential to you. Kyle's heart rate quickened. I did. Did you mean it? Instead of answering with words, Kyle cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her. It was tender and fierce all at once, years of restrained feelings finally breaking free. When they parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for so long, he confessed. But I thought you deserved better than an alpha whose attention was always divided. I don't want better, Aaron whispered. I want you, all of you, duties and all. Then you have me. Kyle pulled her close, and for the first time in years, felt completely at peace. My brave, compassionate, extraordinary Aaron. They stood together under the stars, two wolves who'd found each other through chaos and darkness. The pack celebrated around them, united and strong, their future secure because one shy beta had chosen compassion over glory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding trust, healing divisions, strengthening alliances. But tonight, in the quiet space between crisis and calm, Kale and Aaron simply held each other and watched their pack dance in the moonlight. The shy beta who'd missed the test had become the wolf who saved them all. And in doing so, she'd found not just her place in the pack, but her place beside an alpha who'd been waiting for her all along. A new dawn had come to Silvermoon, and it was brighter than anyone had dared to hope.